You are connected.
Hello, you guys. It's time for another dose of Outside the Box with Stephanie. Sage the coach. My real name is Stephanie, and so sometimes, but for this show, I'm Sage the coach, and I want to do a special segment for tonight. So tonight, I'm going to talk about relationships. So for those of you who don't know, I'm not just Sage the coach because I coach basketball or anything like that. I'm Sage the coach because I am a certified life and relationship coach. And so tonight I want to do a special segment, which I want to do regularly about relationships. And we're going to talk about relationships. And so for the show tonight, since this is my first relationship show, I want to just answer some questions about relationships so you guys can get a feel for the perspective that I bring and, the type of coach that I am when it comes to relationships. But and so my show usually comes on Monday nights at 7 or 8 p.m. It's usually 8 p.m., but sometimes I push it to 7 if I have guests, because a lot of times the people are not in my time zone, and then it gets a little bit late for them. So I want to respect their time and bring them on a little bit earlier if they're not in my time zone. So when I have guests, sometimes it'll be at 7, but for the most part, it's at 8. And so again, I want to, I have other shows planned in the future for Let's Talk About Relationships, which is, what this segment is going to be about. And I would like for you guys to just give me a moment, because this is my first time using this platform that I'm using right now. And I just want to make sure everything is working. So I'm going to just look at my Facebook page and make sure everything is working right. So just give me a minute, and that'll give people some time to, sign in and, things of that nature. So just give me a moment. Hey, Jason, I see you there. Thanks for tuning in. Jason is definitely a loyal. Ron and the other guys, they always say ladies and loyals, and Jason is definitely a loyal. Like, I really appreciate his support. And so just a second here, I'm just going to, again, make sure it's posted everywhere that I want it to be posted. And then we will get going. So as you guys see, I'm rolling solo tonight. I usually have Ron here with me, and I'm feeling kind of naked without him, but he might jump on a little bit later and, bring some more to the conversation, because I always like what he brings to the conversation. And so it looks like everything is where I want it to be. And then we can go ahead and dive in. Here we go. There we go. Okay, so I will check, since I'm going solo tonight. I will check the comments periodically. So you guys, I really want to, because of the past shows that I've done, I haven't paid as much attention to the comments as I wanted to. And so I want to start paying more attention to the comments. And so I will be checking them periodically. So just bear with me. If you send something, I will look at it. Again, I'm a one-woman show tonight, so be patient with me. And so, okay, Jason said he's ready for a question. Jason, you can go ahead and send your question, and I will answer it, in a minute. I want to do a little bit of intro to the perspective that I bring, that I'm coming from when it comes to relationships. So again, I have about 5 or 6 questions that people have already submitted to me that I'm going to answer. But I want to do a little bit of introduction to my perspective on relationships in general, so you guys will know where I'm coming from. And so again, I am a certified life and relationship coach, but I do coach from a Christian perspective. You guys know my show is Outside the Box, which is aims to show people that God is bigger than our boxes. And it is no other place that this is probably more true than when it comes to relationships. Like, relationships are a very, very big part of all of our lives. And it's that way for a reason. It's not an accident, and they are difficult for a reason. And so And so what I want, the thing about relationships that I think is the main reason why they, well, let me back up for a minute. So relationships are a very, very big part of our life, and God designed it that way for a reason. And it is up to us to, go through the motions of the relationship and learn from the relationship in order to uncover what those reasons are, because they're going to be different for everybody. But the main thing, the main purpose of relationships is to help us grow. You have a lot of people who look at relationships as like what somebody can do for them, or what they have or what they don't have and things like that. And that's really not the relationship, what relationships are about. One of the things when I talk about outside the box, what I like to do, especially with my coaching, and it's entangled with my theme of outside the box, is to help people see things from a deeper perspective or wider perspective than people are usually used to seeing things as. And again, it's true when it comes to relationships. And so for a lot of times people just think that relationships are about them and what they want. And, sometimes about the other person. You have people who are like, I don't want to say obsessed, but they become consumed with the needs and things of the other person. And that's not what relationships are for. God created relationships to help us grow. And without relationships, there are things that we will never see about ourselves on our own. The Bible talks about a man is always right in his own eyes. And so when it comes to us looking at ourselves, we will always see ourselves from a very, very biased point of view. We will always make it seem like the things that we do are justified and they're right and there's nothing wrong with them. And it's through relationships that we see a reflection of ourselves in another person. And that is what relationships are for, whether it's parental relationships, relationships with friends, and especially when it comes to romantic relationships, because there's no other person in your life. I'm speaking more for a marriage, but our relationships, there's no other person in your life besides your parents as you get older that will be closer to you. It should be anyway, than somebody you share an intimate relationship with. And so that person serves as a mirror to help you see yourself. A lot of the times we don't like what we see. And instead of us dealing with the things that we're seeing as a reflection in the other person, we just simply blame the other person. When a lot of the times it is there for us to see ourselves, to examine ourselves, and to be honest with ourselves about the things that we do and say and things like that. And so most of the time, this is the problem when it comes to relationships, because people don't want to see themselves and they get so focused on the other person that they automatically think the other person is the problem. When in relationships, I would say 99.999% of the time, both of you guys are the problem. And if you saw the promo video that I created, I towards the end there it says there are two sides to a story, but the truth is usually in the middle. So you have the guy, you have the girl, and they both have their complaints and things like that against each other. And they both seem very, very sincere and passionate about what they think is the problem. But the truth is actually in the middle of what both of those people are saying, because both people are going to minimize what they're doing wrong and amplify what the other person is doing wrong. And so then you pay more attention to the other person. But really, you have to look at yourself, because we can't control other people. All we can do is control ourselves. And the situation, the relationship is set up, God designed it this way for you to see yourself, not necessarily to now try to fix another person. We can't fix other people. We can only fix ourselves. And so that's kind of the perspective that I bring, is to show people that middle line where it's not just about him versus her, or you hurt me, I hurt you, or you didn't do this, that you didn't fulfill the expectation that I wanted, and so now I don't want to deal with you. I mean, you see that a lot, like in social media, things like that. People always have this idea that if you can't do something for me, then I'm not going to deal with you. That's not love. That's not a relationship. And it's very, very selfish, but it's becoming the norm more and more that the relationship is all about what you can do for me. That is not the purpose of relationships. And when you have that mentality, most of the time the relationship will fail, but I'll go into that a little bit more. And so again, I just want to kind of show that line in the middle so the people can see themselves and work on themselves. And that is how actually relationships progress. You see people who have been together for 30, 40, 50 years, and then you see the end results of their relationship and you think it's great and they're fine and they begin there all the time, and of course we like to romanticize things, but the hard work that it takes to get there is self-reflection. It hands down is self-reflection, and self-reflection goes hand in hand with spiritual growth. And so that's the perspective that I bring. That's what I'll be pinpointing. And so in a few minutes here, I want to check the comments really, really quickly. And then I am going to go into the first question. So 1 second, let me go into the first question. I should have had me some water here. I don't have any water and my throat is getting kind of dry, but I'll survive. So let me just make sure. Okay, so it's not a lot of questions right now. So I hope, there are some people who asked me questions before, and I hope you guys are tuning in to get those answers that you asked. Okay, so Jason, if you're still watching, you can go ahead and answer your question. You said I have a question whenever you are ready to. Okay, let me know. I'm ready for your question now, Jason, if you want to go ahead and ask. But I will answer the first question until I get his question. And so the first question that I got is, why don't men communicate? And so I like to say the reason why I answer questions, because I think that this is really, really important, because if you ask most people, what is 1 second? Can you please close my door? Close it. Kids. Anyway, so if you ask most people what the number one problem is in a relationship, most people say communication. And so I think it's really important to address this communication issue, because it's a big problem in a lot of relationships. And so the person who asked me the question said, why don't men communicate? And so the reason that men don't communicate, from my Christian relationship coach perspective, is because men process information differently from women. A lot of times people, God made men and women, and he made us to be in relationships. And then you wonder why is it so difficult to be in relationships? Like, if God made us to be in a relationship, then why are there so many things that stop us from being able to be in the relationship that God created us to have? The thing is that we are different, and we are different for a reason, again. And so, of course, if we didn't live in a fallen world, those differences would be accentuated, and we will come together to form a more complete picture of what love actually is. But because we are not in the state that we were meant to be in, namely like sin-free, since we have sin, instead of those things that God created to bring us together to create a bigger picture of what love is, they are now used to pull us apart. And so women are created more to be the communicators. Women are created differently from men, and the way that we are created enables us to communicate much more easily. Men are more logical. Not all men, so I don't want to, make it seem like I'm just putting all men in the same bucket. But most of the time, men are created to be much more logical, and women are more emotional. So if you look at those two things, if you bring, first of all, us in our single body, we have logic and we have emotion. A lot of the times, even the conflict within ourselves comes from our emotion and logic being out of balance. So if you can be out of balance within yourself when it comes to your own emotion and logic, how much more for a being that's tends to gravitate more towards emotion, and one who gravitates more towards logic. So when those two people come together, again, they create a bigger picture of what love is meant to look like and be like. But again, when we don't come together, they end up causing friction. And so because men are more logical, they do not necessarily have the communication. Logic kind of takes place inside of your head, right? So they most of the time, and not all men, because I'm not a man, and I like to speak on things I know about, so I'm going to be very, very careful that I am not like making it seem like all men are one way, because they're not. But most of the time, men like to think things through, and you can't think things through in your mind logically a lot of the times while you're talking at the same time. And so that's one reason. So men like to process information internally, women process information externally. So that makes us more apt to communicating, because if you process information externally, anybody that's around you, you're going to communicate with. That's why women, a lot of times, we need to talk our problems out and stuff like that, because we process information externally. So men process it internally, and that makes it so when you're trying to talk to them, they're trying to think, and you're messing up their thought process. And so a lot of times they get frustrated with that, and then people take stuff the wrong way, and men get annoyed at women, and women get frustrated with men, instead of us both kind of understanding that it is not personal. We're just processing information differently, and for us to give each other the space to be able to do that. And then after that information is processed, especially for men, and then now we can come together and actually talk about it in a way that women, that will be beneficial for the way the woman processes information. Another thing about men, because they are tend to be more logical, they're not led by their emotions like women are, which is not bad. Like a lot of the times women get a bad rap for being more emotional, but God created us that way too, and it's that way for a reason. So again, if you have the guy and the girl, we will balance each other out if you have a guy that's logical and a girl that's more emotional. Because if you have a girl that's just as logical as the guy, they kind of are missing some very important parts to help them grow. And if the same thing, if you have two people that are emotional, then they're missing some essential parts to help each other grow. So if you go back to what I said, this is all about growth. You can't grow with somebody who is the same as you. Like you guys would just basically keep recycling each other's stuff. So for a guy to be more logical, it helps the woman to grow in a way that she's not kind of leans towards. And for a guy to not be as emotional, being with a woman helps him grow in that way. So we balance each other out. And so again, to go back to, and sometimes I can kind of give very long answers to questions, so bear with me. But so guys, when it comes to emotions, they have to do a little bit more work to process those than kind of women have to. Like we understand emotions a little bit better, not totally, because we need some help in that department too, just like they need some help in the logical department. But we can process emotions much easier than they can. Men have trouble processing emotion, especially when they are logical kind of based creatures. So they need more time to do that, and it's a little bit more of a struggle for them. And so it kind of lends itself to them not being able to communicate, because communication kind of comes from emotion. If you're not a self-contained being, most of us are not, but you know, with men and their logic, they can kind of feel like they don't need to be emotional, and they don't really see the need for it sometimes. And so for them to learn how to process emotion, it requires them to be a little bit more vulnerable than they used to, and to kind of dibble and dabble in an area that's not familiar to them. If it was like them to stay on logical island, they would be fine. But when you're asking them to come out of that logic and kind of join you on your island of emotional, it's a little bit uncomfortable for them, and it takes a little bit more time for them. And so if they're not encouraged to do that or feel that it's safe to do that, a lot of the times they won't. And this can get really, really complicated, and I don't want to take too long on this question. So if you guys need any clarification of what I'm saying, you can ask the question. But really quickly, Jason says, indeed. And to piggyback upon the previous question, why do you feel that men are more so unable to have cognitive, comfortable, and intuitive relationships? We as men also want to be loved and appreciated like women do as well. So why do you feel that men? So let me answer Jason's question really quickly, and I think it will kind of add to the original question. I feel that men are more so unable to do that because that's how they were created, and in our imperfect existence of being in a sinful world. I'm trying to think. Let me think of a better way to say that. Okay, so I kind of said it before. Okay, let me go back. God created men and women to come together. We are two pieces of the same half. You know, God took Eve from Adam, and then Adam said, "This is woman, she comes from me." Like, we were created to come back together. I mean, if you think about the whole act of sex and making love, what do? We come together. So when you come together, the strengths that both people have were meant to help the other person grow in that area. That would create a bond with those people, that creates a relationship with those people, and that helps them both to grow. But in our fallen condition, those very same things are being used for the opposite purpose. So while men are more unable to have cognitive or being comfortable in intuitive relationships, it's because they are separated from their other half, the other emotional half of them, which comes from a woman. And so they have to learn how to do that. It comes natural for men to be logical, but of course they do still have emotions, like what Jason is saying. So if they do still have emotions, they want to be loved, then it's like they still have emotions too. So you have a lot of women who think that men are just so cold, they don't have feelings. Of course they have feelings. They're human beings. But it's almost like their emotional muscle is very small because they don't really know how to use it, and they don't use it as much as they use the logical part of themselves. So, but being around a woman helps them exercise that emotional muscle, if that makes any sense. A woman being around a man helps her exercise her logical muscle. And so with us being around each other, we stimulate growth in each other. So men, because they are not connected to their half, especially if they have mothers. Okay, so like we're getting really deep here. So, and I don't want to go too deep because I can't. If a man is raised with a mother who's loving towards him and stuff like that, it teaches him how to use his emotional muscle. If he does not have that, he's not going to know how to use it, because it has to come from somebody you have a connection and relationship with and stuff like that, somebody you trust, right? We don't, even when it comes to logic, women are not going to listen to men that they don't trust. So you're going to learn from somebody and grow in these areas with people you have a connection with. And so men, especially in our world and our culture, they're actually raised to suppress their emotional muscle. And so that's why they have trouble. They want love. They feel like we do, but they need help growing that part of themselves. And that's what happens in a relationship. And a lot of the times, instead of women being patient with men and understanding that they need that woman in their lives to help them grow in that way, women get frustrated, like, why can't you just be like me? Basically, that's what you're saying. You're saying, why can't you just be emotional like me? Well, he's not emotional like you. He's not wired that way. And men can say the same thing about women, and they do. Why can't you just be logical like me? Like, it's not explicitly stated, but that's behind a lot of the frustration. And it's because we are made differently. And so that was a very, very long answer to the question, but I hope I have explained it enough to give you guys an understanding of what I mean. And so that is basically like two of the reasons. So I'll just recap really quickly about why men don't communicate. Number one, they process information differently. Number two, they need help to learn how to use their emotional muscle. And number three, our society does not encourage men to do that. You're told to be strong, you can't have feelings, things like that. And so it all works together to just make them poor communicators. Sometimes, not all the times, I've seen men who will communicate a woman out of the room, but a lot of the times that adds to, the friction in a relationship. And women have to learn how to be more patient with men and understanding that they need to learn and grow in this. And so I'm going to leave that question at that, because I feel like I've spent way too much time on that. We're already like at 8:30 and I still have other questions. So if you guys need any clarification on that, you can always, send a message in the chat or message me personally. I am a relationship coach. I do offer free sessions. And so you can also go on my website, my Facebook page, because you have the Speakeasy Facebook page, but then you also have mine, which is Outside the Box. And on there, you can schedule a free session with me if you're interested in going to this a little bit deeper when it comes to your own personal relationships. So the next question that I was asked is, how do you compromise when you are used to being independent? And the person who asked me this question knows why I am smiling. So, and this is I think this is an important question because, you know, people always say they don't make women like they used to. And so women in the old days were much more dependent on the men in their lives, and they were much more compromising, almost because they didn't have a choice. And so you have this idea that, I mean, more and more you hear men saying that women are becoming too independent and they don't need men anymore, and they have their, because they're more independent, they have attitude and they're uncompromising, and that they don't even know how to be in a relationship anymore because they have become too independent. And so I think this again is an important question to answer, because it is also something that interferes a lot in relationships, especially in this new day and age, much more independence and freedom than women have had in previous, you know, generations, history, and things like that. And so to answer this question, I have to go back to what I originally said, which is about relationships were created to help us grow. And so if you are used to being independent and you are used to being on your own, and it becomes very difficult for you to include somebody else in what you're doing and to make those compromises, you are actually denying yourself the opportunity to grow. It's like you have grown to a certain point and you just want to stay there. I mean, we all like what's comfortable. So don't get me wrong, I like what's comfortable. And I'm noticing the older I get, the more I like what's comfortable. And so it's not unusual to want to be comfortable, but we don't grow when we are comfortable. It is just a matter of fact. And so we have to endure those uncomfortable situations, because what comes out of those things are growth. So yes, you can be independent and you can, you know, not need a man for especially the typical things that women say they need men for, like money, you know, support and fix, and, you know, fix stuff around the house, whatever, all the other reasons women say. But if you cannot allow room in your life for that person, and you cannot compromise and allow that person to come in, you can't grow like that. I mean, you really can't. And it really boils down to you making a choice, because it's not that you can't do it, because it's like, you know, if you only have one eye and somebody say, well, look out the eye you don't have. No, you actually cannot do that because you don't have another eye. But you have the ability to do that. You have the ability to compromise. You're just making a choice not to do it. And so once you make the choice to do it, it definitely becomes more easier. It becomes easier. I said more easier, but it definitely becomes easier when you simply make the choice to allow another person some space in your life. And when you just refuse to do that, that just simply means you don't want to be in a relationship bad enough. Like seriously, because our relationships require compromise. And so you have to choose to allow a person in your life. And if you just really don't want to, and to you it feels like you can't do it, it's usually the indication of a deeper issue. Like you have a lot of fear. You've been hurt before. You don't want to be hurt again. Sometimes you have trust issues. So if you just really feel like you can't compromise and allow somebody else some space in your life, you're not only denying yourself the ability to grow, you're like overly protecting yourself, and you are you usually have some deeper stuff going on that has nothing to do with the other person, actually. And so what Jason says, I agree. Is there any way or anything that a man can do better to be man? Like you have said previously, is there a way as a man that I, as a man, can do better so that I can do better regarding my significant other? Okay, Jason, I like that. And I will get to that in a minute. Let me wrap this question up about compromising. And so you have to choose to do that. And that's the case for everybody. Sometimes people, you want somebody in your life really bad, and that makes you more flexible to compromising. And so if you don't really want somebody bad enough to compromise, then you're not going to do it. So I would say, look at your issues, look at yourself. And it's totally possible that you just don't necessarily need to be in a relationship. I don't like it when women have this idea that they have to be in a relationship. No, you actually don't. And I know some women who have been not in relationships for a very long time, and they're perfectly fine. So you don't have to be with somebody. And if you're happy by yourself, as the Bible says, you are doing much better than somebody who has somebody, because there's much more to go through when you have a partner, and much more distraction, much more heartache and things like that. So if you can be happy by yourself, then by all means be happy by yourself. But you also have to be honest with yourself and say, do I really want somebody? And if you really want somebody and you just keep telling yourself you don't want anybody, but really deep down you do, that's going to create a level of conflict and unhappiness in your life that's not going to have a solution. And so you have to ask yourself, do I really want to be with somebody? If you do, then you have to make the decision to compromise. It's just a matter of choice. If it's hard for you to do that, then you need to look at yourself and figure out why, because really the essence of love is compromise. And so if you cannot compromise, not only are you not allowing yourself the space to grow, you will never experience genuine love, because genuine love cannot come through any other method but compromise. And so if you can't do that, you're denying yourself the opportunity to grow and love another person and have them love you in return. And so I hope that answers your question, the person who gave it to me. If you have any other questions, of course, as I said before, you can reach out. Okay, so let me get back to Jason's question really quickly. He says, basically in a nutshell, he says, what can he do better so that, okay, so the thing that you're asking, Jason, he's basically asking, what can he do better as a man to, I guess, to be a better man in relationships, which I'm assuming you're asking me. If I'm incorrect in that, Jason, you can clarify. But the thing, and like I said in the beginning, relationships are about growth, but too often we look at the other person. It's not about the other person. It's about you. People that will say anything about you is selfish. No, it actually is about you. You have to look in the mirror. So the best way for you to be a good spouse or a good partner to somebody else is to work on yourself. So you shouldn't be so focused on like, okay, what can I do for Sally or what can I do for Jim to make them happy? If you are being true to yourself and you're working on yourself, especially your issues, because we all have them, actually a part of the process of relationship is that your issues come to the surface. And if they didn't come to the surface in a relationship, you will never see them. You will think you're fine. So as your relationships come, as your issues come to the surface within the relationship, you need to deal with them and not just blame the other person, because they have issues too, granted. And what the enemy often does is relationships is to instigate problems between each other that are rooted in our issues. So if Sally has an issue with trust and then Jim has an issue with, I'm trying to think of an issue Jim can have. So one person has an issue with trust and one person has an issue with insecurity. The enemy will instigate those issues in those people, and they will automatically start reflecting and attacking each other, when really it's the issue within them that needs to be addressed. So to answer your question, you have to deal with yourself. So if you have issues with yourself that stop you, just like the previous question about compromise, if you have issues within yourself that's stopping you from doing that, then you have to deal with yourself. The most genuine, long-lasting, deepest love comes from a healthy, emotional, mentally healthy person. So you have to deal with yourself, and that makes you much more able and flexible and loving and able to compromise when you are dealing with another person. So I hope that answers that question. Okay, so this is another good question. So the next question is, why do women, this question came from a guy, you guys, you really might like this question. Okay, so why do women expect men to read their minds? I like this question because sometimes I get upset when women think I'm supposed to read their minds too. And so I see this a lot in women, that they do expect you to read their mind, and I'm guilty of it too. I'm not gonna lie. And so I've been like, I'm a very, very straightforward person, and it really kind of frustrates me when I'm around somebody, especially a woman, who thinks I'm supposed to read her mind. I'm like, hey, can you just tell me what it is? Because I'm not a mind reader, you know. And so I really get this question on both ends, because I have been guilty of also expecting my partner to read my mind. And I've also been frustrated with women who expect me to read their minds. And so, but again, there is a reason. There is a reason for everything, you guys. And we just have to dig deeper and figure out what that reason is and be open to it if we really want to see it. Because if we don't want to see it, it doesn't matter how frustrated we are and things like that, you won't see it. Because God is not forcing knowledge into anybody's head. He's not going to force feed you and shake you and say, hey, get this. You have to be open to it. And if you are open to it, even if it hurts, even if it's not what you want to hear, you will understand the answer, because there is a answer for everything. So to answer that question, it goes back to what I said before about men and women communicating differently. So women, because we are more emotional, it lends itself to us having a higher intuitive nature. And that intuitive nature, we express. So like if you're around a woman, that's what makes us nurturers. So for a woman, say for example, she has the baby cries, she knows what the baby needs. She's really on top of the baby needs, a good mother anyway, and she can kind of pick up on the baby's needs. And so that is very, very priceless. It's very, very valuable, and it's essential to not only nurturing a child, but nurturing anything, for you to kind of pick up on the needs and feelings and things like that of those around you, because you really can't nurture somebody without being able to do that. And so women have that intuitive nature. And so again, God made us more emotional for a reason. We do have that intuitive nature, and it does serve a purpose. And it helps us to become more nurturing as mother, as women, and more loving. The thing is that we think men have that too, and they do not. They do not have that intuitive emotional nature like we have. And so that they can have it, let me say it, they have it, but ours is more than theirs. Because I don't want to make it seem like they're an alien and that they just don't. We all have the same stuff. We just have them in different degrees. And so women are more emotional, more intuitive. Men have it, but it's much less. And so a man can be around you. He does not pick up on what you need like a woman can. And so for a woman, we feel like, I guess the first thing you can say is that women think men have that and they don't. And if you think somebody has that and they're just not giving it to you, it looks like they don't love you. It's like, well, why can't you read me like I read you, you know? And when you don't do that, it comes across to a lot of women the wrong way, but men don't do that. They can't just look at your face and tell how you're feeling, or look at your mannerisms, or pick up on your energy and things like that. So again, women have to understand that men don't have the same sense that we have, and we have to learn how to speak each other's language and not expect men to be able to speak our language, or for men to expect for women to speak their language. We have to learn how to talk to each other in a way that we both understand things. And so I'm trying to think, did I answer the question fully the way that I want to answer it? And so, yeah, so women have that intuitive nature. They think men have it, men don't. And they get frustrated when men not picking up. I will say this. You might think that that's silly. Like a lot of men will say, oh, that's really silly. Why would you expect me to read your mind? When you have somebody, this boils down to like a spiritual connection. Because when you have a spiritual connection with somebody, you can pick up on them without them having to say so. And when you're around a person that can pick up on your needs, your wants, or your feelings without you having to say it, that is golden. Like that can't really be replaced in a relationship with something else. So while it's frustrating at times, and then women also need to learn that men need to learn how to do this, the closer you guys get together, the deeper the spiritual connection you have, which comes from being considerate of each other and understanding each other's differences and working with each other's differences. That spiritual connection will enable you to be able to sense the other person without them saying anything. And the spiritual connection is much, much deeper than a physical one, a mental one, or whatever. Spiritual connection is the connection that God seeks to have with us. And so you hear people who talk about getting prophecies and God telling them things. That's a spiritual connection, because God didn't say it. You know, he's not around them. And then we can't see God's face, so we don't know, but we pick up on his energy, and his energy has messages in it. And so like for a woman, if she's sad or she's hurt or something like that, her energy will release that message without her saying it. Then you can pick up on that stuff without her necessarily saying it. And so I just want to kind of emphasize the importance of a spiritual connection. Even though men and women are different, if you guys are growing together, and like I said, growth is the point of a relationship. As you grow closer together, you will have a spiritual connection. It will increase, and you will be able to pick up on each other's needs, each other's thoughts, each other's feelings. I have even been like, you know, my husband's not even around me, and then I can feel that something is going on with him, and I'll call and say, hey, are you okay? those connections are priceless. They are very, very deep and very, very important. Okay, so let me go to Facebook very, very quickly and see if there are any questions or comments, because I can see them here. I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything. Okay, so the next question is, okay, this lady asked me this question actually today, and I hope she's watching so I can answer her question. She says, why do men value boobs and butts over brains and beauty? A lot of women think this, and unfortunately, in a lot of ways, it's true. And I will go into explaining it. Again, I don't want to assume things about men, and I wish Ron was here to bring his male perspective in, but I will still make my best attempt to answer the question. And so the thing is, it goes back to, again, I am a Christian coach, so a lot of the stuff I talk about comes from the Bible. And we are in a fallen condition. And so I just talked a little bit before about that spiritual connection. One of the main things about our fallen condition, which means that we are not connected to God or each other, is that we have lost the spiritual connection to God and each other. It's not very strong. Either it's lost completely or it's so dull that we don't feel it to the level that God intended us to feel it. That's actually what our fallen nature means. It means we are spiritually disconnected from God and each other. And so when we are spiritually disconnected from, actually, let me take it a little step further. We are not just spiritually disconnected from God and each other, but also ourselves. And so when we are spiritually disconnected from ourselves, the only other thing that we have to rule our understanding, again, I can go really deeply. I'll just try to say it briefly. We are mind, spirit, and body, and the soul is also the mind. Some people think that the soul is the spirit, but in my understanding, the soul is the mind. So we are mind, spirit, and body. These things were created to operate in unison with each other, with the spirit being the head. So our understanding is supposed to come through the spirit. Our purpose is supposed to come through the spirit. Our knowledge is supposed to come through the spirit. The things that we do in life should be motivated by the spirit. But that is not the case, what we're in right now in our fallen nature, because the spirit has been separated from its source, which was meant to pass us all this information. I just talked before about the spirit and how you can sense stuff in the spirit with other people and its connection to them. And then God wants to have a spiritual connection with us. And through that spiritual connection, information is passed through that spiritual network, so to speak. But when we don't have that, now all we have to go off of in our fallen condition is our own physical needs. We don't have that spiritual guide anymore to tell us our purpose, to tell us what stuff is for, why we feel the way we feel, to help us understand life. We're just going by our experiences and our bodily needs. So when we do that, we live for very surface stuff, because the spirit is basically just everything behind, the reason behind everything. That's what the spirit is. It's the depth of life and the reason behind life and things like that. And so when you have a guy who is not spiritually mature, he has no other recourse but to gravitate towards his body and what he wants and what his body needs. And that's going to be physical. It's going to be boobs. It's going to be, like you said, we said boobs and butts. So it's going to be boobs. It's going to be butts. It's going to be pleasure. When we are not ruled by our spirit mind, we're going to be ruled by the body. And that's what the body wants. And so that's what those men go after. It really takes a man who is mature, especially emotionally and spiritually mature, to not look at a woman from that perspective. And so and so that is and of course, men who don't look at them from that perspective are now more inclined to look at things that cannot be seen, like brains. And even when you talk about beauty to me, genuine beauty is not your face. It's your character, it's your state of mind, it's how you carry yourself, things like that. So you'll have a man when he is mature and he is not just living according to the body, and he has some spiritual maturity, at least a little bit. He's not going to look at a woman from that very, very surface and physical perspective. So I would say to any woman who is trying to get a man's attention or wants a man's attention or like somebody, if all he cares about is butts and boobs, he's not for you. Like he's immature. So he needs to grow up, and you should not, you know, chase him until he grows up. You should move on and find somebody who is where you are at the time. And so so I think that's the way that the best I can answer that question. That's just immaturity. And I guess that's it for that question. So so the last question was not the last, the second to last question is this somebody sent me this message earlier today, which is, how do you deal with a sexless marriage? A relationship. I'm not sure if the person who asks is married or in a relationship. Of course, I am a relationship. I'm a Christian coach, so I kind of geared more towards marriage stuff. I mean, I do talk to people that are in relationships, but I still would try to urge you to do things the correct way, because doing things the Christian way is beneficial for everybody. It's like, it's the healthiest way to do things. And I know a lot of people would disagree with that, and they will argue with me about that. And I would be willing to have that conversation with anybody in any way, at any time. But basically, the Christian way is the more healthier, more productive way to do things. And I don't even want to say the Christian way. I would say the spiritual way, but my spirituality is rooted in the Bible. And so, so if you're in a relationship and you are, and you're not married, and you're of course having sex outside of the relationship, outside of marriage, then I would say you should try to get married. You know, this is a deep conversation, and I don't want to like, I don't want to go too far into that. So let's just say, for question purposes, this is a married couple. And so if you're a married couple, how do you deal with a sexless marriage? It's very, very difficult. Sex is very, very important in a relationship. I talked before about God created us to come together, and even though we come together physically, what is actually happening spiritually is much, much deeper. What we do during sex physically is just a physical manifestation of what is taking place with us spiritually. And that's why it's important to keep sex confined to marriage, because you are bonding yourself spiritually with another person. And that's very, very deep. And it's very, very, it can be very, very fulfilling and help you to grow, or it can destroy you when you connect yourself to a person spiritually that is not you guys, that is, you know, taking for granted the connection that you guys have, and which is much, I know it can happen in marriage, but it's much easier to happen outside of marriage. And when you're married, it's like you and that person at least have a understanding of the commitment, and you guys are committed to some degree to staying together and trying to make it work. So excuse me. So, so to answer the question, I'm trying to get my thoughts together. So in a marriage, okay, sex is very important in marriage. That's why I was. And so it is, okay, so William says, sexy is in the butt and boobs. Beauty is in the eyes and voice. Okay, that's a nice, I like that. I like that. Okay, so, so when you bond yourself to somebody spiritually, if that bond is broken, it damages you spiritually. This is why God wants us to be married. It's not because he's a stickler. It's not because he doesn't want us to have fun. Like, he created sex in and of itself. And so he can't be that much of a stickler if he created it in the first place. But he's giving us the way to do it where we won't get damaged, you know. And so the way to do that is to make sure that bond that you're spiritually making with another person is mutual, and marriage is the safest environment to do that. Not only are you guys merging yourself spiritually, you are merging your life, you are merging minds, you are merging hearts. Like, this is no joke. Like, this is the essence of who we are. So if you're going to merge your spirit, your mind, your heart, your life with another person, let it be in marriage. Like, seriously, because that bond was not meant to be broken once it is made. And so you have to, sex facilitates that bond. And, you know, even in the Old Testament, you know, they had people who they would say, was the marriage consummated? Because if the marriage wasn't consummated, it wasn't recognized as a marriage. Like, it has to be consummated in order to, like, yeah, we said we're going to be one, but to actually be one, we have to come together and be one. Yes, so so sex is very, very important. And so a marriage that does not, that there's this sex is an issue and there's sex is, it's a very, very, very big problem. It is going to make you both drift apart mentally, emotionally, like everything that marriage was created to do, to bring two people together in unison. It is going to do the opposite if you cannot come together, and because sex reinforces that connection. That's why you don't just do it once when you get married and it's over. You continue to do it throughout the marriage because it continues to reinforce that reinforce that connection. And so it's very, very important to keep reinforcing that connection, because if you don't, it's going to gradually drift apart. And when it drifts apart, let's go back to what I said in the beginning, you guys don't grow. And that's the point. So if you're drifting apart, you're not growing together. And then both of you are missing very crucial things that God created you to get from the other person. And so, but I know that's easier said than done. Like, you can easily say, okay, sex is very important in a marriage, but that doesn't still mean that your partner is going to be wanting to do it. And so one thing you have to keep in mind is health issues. And so some people do have health issues and they cannot participate in sex regularly. And it's up to them. Again, we go back to, like, all these things are connected. It goes back to compromise, because if you understand that your partner is having some difficulties and issues, of course you don't want to be like, oh, you have to give it to me. It doesn't matter if you're having issues. Like, that's terrible, right? So you have to keep those things in mind. So if there's no health issue or biological issue that's interfering with that, then sex needs to be a very regular part of the relationship. And if it's just a matter of like intimacy, let me go back. I'm kind of getting confused myself. Even if there's unable to have sex, and saying that in a situation where there's a health issue or something like that, there still should be intimacy. And that intimacy should still be building up to, at some point, having sex. Like, let's be honest. And so there still should be intimacy. There can still be touching. There can still be hugging. I have had couples who were not able to be intimate, but they were very, very affectionate with each other. And there are other things that you can do if you can't actually do the act, that can still help to keep that spiritual connection tight and together. I'm not going to go into that because I don't want to get put in jail by Facebook. So, but again, the person that asked me the question, if you want to reach out to me, schedule a session with me, I can go into this more deeply with you one-on-one. And so, but in a case where there's not a biological issue or a health issue or whatever, you still can't make your partner do it. But so the reason why they don't do it has to be addressed. Again, you go back to what I said to Jason about dealing with your own issue, because if you have somebody that you're with and you guys are married and you're a couple and you're supposed to be intimate, it's important, and the other person can't be, you need to find out why. It's usually an issue, usually an emotional or mental issue that needs to be addressed. And so I would urge anybody in that situation to find out what's going on within themselves and ask the partner that's not having the issue and that wants to reach out and is unable to, and they're being cut off by the partner, to just be a little bit patient, because you do have to be patient. You can't be demanding, like the Bible says we have to do it and you got to give it to me now. No, you have to be a little bit patient, understanding, and give that person a little bit of time to deal with themselves, and them to figure out what's going on with them, because there's a reason. A lot of women have these types of issues because of past trauma that they haven't dealt with. And so they need the space and the time to deal with that. And actually, if you kind of be patient and let them deal with that, then when they're ready, it's probably going to be dynamite. But that's a whole other conversation. So because women like love, we like affection, it's a turn on for us. And so if the person really sees that you're making a sacrifice to be there for them, be understanding for them, help them kind of work through whatever it is that they're going through, that's going to only strengthen the desire to be one with that person, because you feel one with that person because they're in tune with what's going on with you, which again goes back to spiritual connection. And so you need to get to the bottom of it. If the other person is just refusing to get to the bottom of it and they're acting very, very uninterested in what is going what you need, The only thing that you can do, you have two choices. You can either wait it out and pray about it. You know, I'm a Christian. Pray about it. Let God direct you on what to do, or you can leave. I mean, it's not the ideal situation, but you cannot force another person. You can't, and you just have to kind of try to deal with it the best way you can. For me, I would say pray. A lot of people have this misunderstanding that our desires are uncontrollable, and when we want it, we need to have it, and you have to give it to us. And that's not true. That's why a lot of Christians get themselves in trouble when it comes to sexual stuff, because they have this misconception that we have no control over ourselves sexually. Okay, then God is asking us to do something impossible, and that doesn't seem fair. He wouldn't say control yourself if you could not control yourself. You can't control yourself. Again, it kind of boils down to you making a choice to do so, and then kind of exploring those avenues and praying and asking God how to help you do that, because it is possible. Like, I know the very, very strong at times, but you can control, and we do have control over our bodies in that way. And so I hope that answers that question. Again, you know, the guy who asked, if you wanted me to talk to you more one-on-one about this, I can. But you have to get to the bottom of it. And if doing that doesn't work, then you either have to deal with it, or you can make some space. You know, sometimes telling your partner, hey, you know, if you don't want to work on this or fix this, then I'm going to have to take a couple steps back. Sometimes it's a motivation for them to, you know, do something about it. And so let me read the comments here for a second. So why do so many married women and men? Yeah. Okay. So somebody asked, so why do so many married women and women in general use sex as a weapon? Because they can. So, I mean, the thing is this: people, it goes back to what I said before. Relationships are about growth, and people often reflect the stuff that they need to grow on onto the other person. And so when you are more so looking at the other person, the thing is that if you're looking at the other person, what sometimes naturally comes out of that is trying to control them, because you think if they just do what you want them to do, everything will be fine. And so you start trying to come up with these little tactics and techniques and guilt and whatever, nagging, you know, intimidating. You're trying to control the other person. You're trying to make them do what you want them to do, because you think that's the problem. It's not the problem. 99% of the time, it's not the problem. And so sex becomes a means of trying to control the other person, because to you, if they just do what you want, then everything will be fine. It's not true. And so that's why women do that. And I think in some cases men do it too, not as much, but yeah, so women just see it as a way to control a guy, because it's very well known that that's what guys want, that's what they like, you know, things like that. And so women see that that's what they like, and they say, okay, I'm going to use this to try to control you. Guys do, I mean, people do in relationships when it comes to money, when it comes to influence, when it comes to, you know, even being nice. Like, people get into arguments and they want to give you the silent treatment. That silent treatment is like, I'm not going to talk to you until you do what I say. You will never get anywhere in a relationship trying to make the other person do what you want. If people are not doing these things out of their own heart, it's not love. And so that's another big thing in relationships that, you know, it's a very, very common problem, because people get so fixated on the other person. You can't make anybody do anything, and you shouldn't try, because if they're not doing it because they love you, then that's not really what you're aiming for, what I hope you're not aiming for anyway. But again, that's a whole nother show. That's like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 shows. So but I can go into that later. Again, this is going to be a regular segment that I do talking about relationships. And so I will go deeper into some of this stuff later. Just for this show, I just want to answer some questions so you guys get a feel for my perspective as a relationship coach. Okay, and so says only we can fix patience. Okay. So Jason is asking, what is the difference between having faith in a person versus having expectations from the same person? Oh, I love that question. Thank you so much, Jason. Having Having faith in the person. Let me think for just a moment. And it's almost time for me to wrap up my show, but I'll try to squeeze this question in. So what is the difference between having faith in a person versus expectation? I think expectations are one of the biggest. Let me take that back. I think expectations are the biggest problem in relationships. Like, I know people say communication, money, stuff like that. To me, it's expectation, because everything you do is going to come out of what you're expecting. And a lot of times, a lot of the frustrations and problems and tensions in relationships come from people not getting what they were expecting to get. People are not robots. We are human beings, and you can't have an expectation that if the other person doesn't meet, now you're upset. It just, I mean, like, I can really go into this much, much deeper, but I'll just try to summarize it, which is that we have to be very, very careful about the expectations that we put on other people. I think it's a very, very huge problem. Men sometimes have very ridiculous expectations of women, and women definitely have some ridiculous expectations of men. And so we get into relationships with these ridiculous expectations, and then when it's not happening the way we were expecting, we're ready to throw in the towel. We get mad. We resort to all these manipulative and abusive tactics because we're trying to get that expectation. When sometimes we need to check our expectations. A woman does not have to be available for sex for you every time you feel like you need it, in the morning, in the night, in the evening, 5 times. Like, that's a ridiculous expectation. And it's actually a disrespectful expectation, because you're not respecting her rights or feelings as a separate human being. Like, it's her body. She should be willing. Like I said, you can't force people to do things. If she's not willing, give her some space, give her some time, and work on those things that will encourage her to be willing. Treat her nice, buy her flowers, rub her feet. Like, come on, put some work in. You know what I'm saying? Not just be demanding. And I know all guys don't do that, but I know some who do. It's like, hey, I want it, give it to me now. It's a problem. Anyway, so expectations are a problem. So for women, a man does not have to make you feel like you're floating on clouds 24/7. And when he doesn't make you feel like that, that's a problem. Like, that's a ridiculous expectation. And a lot of times women who have those expectations usually have some deeper issues that they're trying to make the man feel instead of just dealing with their issue. And so again, these things come to the surface in relationships, and they come to the surface so that we can deal with them, not just blame them on the other person. So it's very easy for you to say, oh, he doesn't buy me flowers, he doesn't do this, he doesn't do that. But if him not doing that is bothering you so much, that usually means there's something else deeper there, because that shouldn't bother you that much. Like, you can say, you're upset that he doesn't do it, or maybe disappointed. But if it becomes a reoccurring issue that's actually causing problems in a relationship, that means you need to take a look in the mirror. You need to look at yourself and find out, why is this bothering me to this degree? Because if the person is not hitting you, the person is not berating you, and the person is not mistreating you, everything else is like, it's not a given. If you're not being abused, it's everything else is, what's the word for it? I don't know, but I'll go into that later. So you have to check your expectations at the door. People have, oh my goodness, some ridiculous expectations. And so for you to have expectations is totally different from having faith in a person, because faith is kind of rooted out of love, in that you see the best in the person regardless of how they're acting. So if I'm having, my husband is not being the best or treating me the best, for me to have faith in him is for me to understand his potential in that. Like, yeah, he's not having a bad day, but I know that this is who he is deep down. He just is having a bad day, or he's just experiencing this. That's more along the lines of faith, in my opinion. It's having faith in the goodness of the person and who they are on a deeper level, instead of always reacting to how they act and respond and do things on the surface, and kind of having some patience with them in that, because we all do it. It's not just men, it's not just women. Men blame relationship problems on women. Women blame relationship problems on men. It's everybody. Everybody has issue, and it's up to us to deal with the issue that we are bringing to the table. Because a lot of the time when you deal with the issue you're bringing to the table, it creates space for the other person to now deal with their issue. But when you guys are just coming at each other, nobody deals with anything. So deal with your stuff. So having faith that, he's just having a bad day. He's okay. I know deep down, I see the best in him. I would hope. And when you marry somebody, it's because you saw the best in that person. And you have to remind yourself of that best that you saw, even when stuff is going bad. Yeah, he's not being the way he was, but I still know I see the best in him and I know he can do better. Women can do this much, much easier than men. It goes back to our intuitive spirit. We can see the potential and the spirit of a guy much easier than a guy can see with a woman. But that's faith to me, and faith in the person. Expectation is thinking that they're supposed to do X, Y, Z, Z, Z. And if they don't do it, now you guys have a problem. That is not love. That is not a relationship. And I was talking to CJ, a podcast host, about this a little bit ago, because he posted on his page this this little repost of this post, and it was saying that men, when they treat their woman better, then they get the king treatment. And I kind of commented like I didn't like that, because I think women use that as an excuse to not be the best. Like, you can't say, if you do this for me, then I'll do this for you. If you treat me this way, then I'll treat you this way. That is not a relationship. That is not love. You should be treating the person the exact same every time, regardless of how they're treating you. Other person should be treating you the exact same every time. You should be as loving as you are when they are loving, and you should be loving when they're not loving. If people keep turning on their on and off switch every time people are in a bad mood, having a bad day, get an attitude, the relationship is rocky, it's a mess, it's a headache, and it doesn't last. Sometimes we just have to be patient with each other and move past it. You know what? I'm still going to be my best to you, even when you're not acting right. And a lot of times that encourages the person, you know what, let me cut it out because she's still being good to me. Or the man will say, you know what, let me take a step back and check myself, because she's still being nice to me and I'm being a jerk. So that is what it takes to keep a relationship together. Compromise, patience, and a deeper connection. And so let me see if anybody else is saying anything else. So this, I'm running a little bit over, so it's 9:09. So I'm going to answer this last question, and you guys, I'm going to wrap up. And the last question that someone asked me is how to know if somebody really loves you. Of course, this is a very deep question, and it's not straightforward. The truth is that sometimes you can never really know that 100%. Like, let me take that back. It's very difficult to know. I mean, because people can pretend, right? Like, you can have somebody who looks like they love you. I can't tell you how many times I watched Dateline, and they had this whirlwind romance and blah, 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 blah. And then the person killed the other person. So you can say, did they really love them? Because they eventually killed them. So you can be manipulated. So people can come across like they love you and they really don't. But the main thing is that time usually tells those things. And that's why it's important not to rush into stuff and give people time, because time will usually tell that. And the thing is, you don't necessarily have to be so concerned if somebody really, really loves you or not, because you can never really go inside of them and see. What you have to pay attention to is how the other person is treating you. And so, yeah, we all have issues and we all have stuff we got to get over, and we all don't treat each other the best all the time. So that's just the case. But when somebody is mistreating you habitually, it's usually, I don't even want to say it's the same, they don't love you, because actually somebody can treat you bad habitually and still love you. They just have a very immature understanding of love. And you can say, until you grow up a little bit, I'm going to take a couple steps back. So it's not to say like, yeah, I know you love me, but you're not treating me right, but I'm going to overlook the fact that you're not treating me right and just focus on the fact that you love me. No, that's silly. You're actually not helping that person grow, which again is the purpose of relationship. Because if you're going to help that person grow, you need for them to come to terms with the love that they do have. And you can't do that if you're just tolerating their bad behavior. And I did a video about this a little bit ago on my blog or whatever. And so you can look at the person outwardly and you just look at how they're treating you. It really doesn't matter so much, like, do you really love me or not? Because if their actions are not lining up with it, their actions need to be dealt with more than their deeper feeling. And so if a person is not treating you right, you can address it and say, hey, I don't like this. I don't like the way you're treating me. If you can't treat me better or work on this, or we can't work on this, it doesn't even matter if the person really loves you or not. You might have to make some space until they can grow up and understand not just the feeling of love, but the expression and demonstration of love, because those are different maturity levels within love. Like you can love somebody, like my kids love me, but would they like, do they care about what I need? No, they don't. You know, I could be sick and they're still like, can we have water? You know, so they have a very immature understanding of love. They're kids. So some people, adults, still have an immature understanding of love. So they see love just from how they feel sometimes and what they want and stuff like that. And they just need to grow up a little bit. And so you can deal with the person and work with them until they grow up in love and understand the deeper meaning of what it means. And in my opinion, a lot of us need to grow up in love. Actually, everybody does, because love is much, much greater than a lot of times we realize. We kind of make love very, very superficial and about us and stuff like that. And love is way, 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 way bigger than that. You know, a lot of times women act like we understand love and men don't understand love. And it's true, we understand love a little more easier because of our intuitive and emotional nurturing nature. But we don't understand love either on the level that God is, because God is love. He is the standard. He is where it comes from. We don't understand it nearly on that level to that we think we do. We still need to learn how to love better and stuff too. So I would just say, like, you can look at the person's behavior, and over a period of time that you guys can mature and grow in love with each other. If the person is continuously doing things like mistreating you, ignoring you, denying you, disrespecting you, then you can kind of say that person is, they either don't love you or they're not mature enough in love. And it's kind of up to you to decide how you want to deal with that. Because every problem in a relationship does not mean leave. Like it's so common now that every time there's a little bump in any relationship, people are like, I'm out of here. I'm out of here. That's not love. Like, you can deal with and go through some stuff with people, and you guys come out stronger on the other end when you do that. So every problem does not mean, okay, I'm just going to leave. Sometimes you just need to work through things. And so yeah, you can have an issue, work through it, and you guys can eventually be okay. It's when problems are habitual and the other person doesn't want to work on it at all. They're not interested in working on it and things like that. That's when it becomes more of like a no-win situation, because again, you can't force anybody to do anything. They have to do it willingly. If you're trying to make somebody do something, you're automatically in the wrong. You have to accept their choice, even if their choice is that they want to leave you. You can try to convince them, but when you start getting to trying to make them, manipulate them and stuff like that, you're wrong. We all have free will. We can choose what we want to do. And just like a person was in your life, wasn't there before, they can not be afterwards, and you'll be fine. So anyway, there's a lot of stuff that I can go into with all of these different questions, but it's getting late. I'm almost 15 minutes over, so I want to go ahead and wrap this up. I hope with these questions, I've given you guys a little bit more perspective on the approach that I come from with my relationship coaching. I do offer free sessions, and even free sessions for couples. If you want to go to my Facebook page, Outside the Box, you can schedule an appointment there. And I do have other Let's Talk About Relationship segments coming up. I'm going to have, actually next week, I have a second Let's Talk About Relationships segment in which I'm going to have some women come on, and we're going to talk about some of the lessons that God taught us in marriage, because a lot of the time women just think men are the problem. They don't do anything wrong. Men are so mean. They're so cruel, whatever. And we're the problem too. So it goes to what I was saying before. We are the problem too. And women, and I'm speaking from woman's perspective because I am a woman. And a lot of times we need to take a very, very long look at ourselves and figure out how we are contributing to the problem. And so we're going to do that next week with a second segment of Let's Talk About Relationship. It's called Wife Lessons 101. And so we are going to, oh my goodness, Ron is like, now you want to come here when I am leaving.
That's exactly was my plan. Because, Lord, you blessed some folks tonight. And I know I was supposed to be here with you. I'm like, I got to hop in. As soon as she's finishing up, didn't want to stop your train that you was on. But, Lord have mercy. I hope people felt everything that you're saying because, woo, you even touched my heart and my soul.
Oh, well, that's good. That's what I'm doing this for, because people, relationships are one of the biggest, I would say at least the top three difficult things that most people deal with on a regular basis. They're very, very difficult. And so people do need a lot of help. I needed a lot of help and I still need help, but I have learned a lot over the years. But we need all the help we can get, honestly, when it comes to relationships. So I'm glad to know that, you got something out of it. And if you got something out of it, I know other people got something out of it. So that's a blessing to me. So I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah, because I was like, I'm gonna hop on eventually. I know I'm gonna be a little bit late, but as I was listening, I was like, this is just Sage by herself, just spilling and pilling all this knowledge, all the different dynamics of marriage, how important it is, who you are being intimate with, why it's set up that way, how it's safe, and it's God's plan for
Mm,
two people to be intimate with each other and only each other, and the reasons why, and
mm,
how powerful it is, and what real love is, what you were just
mm.
talking about. Oh my gosh.
Look, I
The
I
coach.
can even go deeper than that, like if I wanted to. But this is only an hour show, so it's so much stuff you can touch on, and that's why I'm going to keep doing this reoccurringly, because it's a lot of stuff. It's really a lot of stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
I think you said maybe once a month we're gonna break down relationships, right?
Yeah, and actually, I'm gonna do two back-to-back segments this time for the Let's Talk About Relationships, because I am doing another one next week called Wife Lessons 101, where we're just a group of wives. It's going to be about three or four of us. We're just going to talk about a lot of the things that God taught us in our marriages that we didn't think was a problem. Like, we're just looking at the guy thinking he's the one doing everything wrong. And it really takes God to show you yourself and say, no, you're not as innocent as you think you are, and you're contributing to the problem too. And so we're going to talk about ways that we were contributing to our marriage problems and how we had to break outside of that in order to, get the type of marriages that everybody wants.
Oof. Like the statement that I've been really loving that there is three sides to the story. Yours, theirs, and the truth. And
Mm,
you cannot get upset with your partner for how they feel, their
mm,
outlook and whatsoever, because they're gonna have their feelings, like you're saying, things that they're dealing with from the
mm,
past, where you're coming from, and then you got your side, but there's the truth. And how
mm,
y'all get to that truth and grow closer.
exactly.
Communication and pretty much everything just Sage just talked about on this episode, y'all. Y'all,
Mm.
woo, blessing folks on a Monday. I
Trying to, but yeah, thank you so much. I'm glad you came on, even though I'm wrapping up, but I'm glad to see you and know you're doing okay and stuff like that. And again, we're gonna keep doing this. You guys will see ahead of time. You can always go to my page on Outside the Box to see what's coming up, because on the Just Speak Easy page, I'm only gonna post what I'm doing that day on that day. So if you want to know ahead of time what's coming, you have to go to either my Facebook page or my Outside the Box Facebook page, and I can sometimes put stuff in there, sometimes a week ahead or 2 weeks ahead or something like that. So if you guys want to know any time that is coming up, you can do that. Also, make sure you like my page and share my page if you thought that this video was beneficial and other people can learn from it. And like my page, so when something is coming up, you'll get the notifications on your notifications on Facebook. So yeah, but that's it. You got anything else you want to add, Ron, before we get out of here?
No, I just came on real quick to jump in at the end to let the people know what they getting, to lift you up. Thank you. Every Monday, outside the box with Sage the coach, and she on here promoting them coach sessions, free consultations. Hit her up and grow. I know in relationships we all struggle to go get that appropriate help.
Mm,
A lot of people may go talk to their homies or their homegirls and just get bad advice, toxic
exactly.
situations, misled. It's so powerful about having a proper resource to go to and talk through things.
It really is. It really is. Yeah. All right. So I'll let you guys go. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure you come back next week for Wife Lessons 101. And I'm going to do a husband's lessons 101. Also, one of these days, I just got to get a group of guys who are not afraid to put themselves on blast and say what, you know, the stuff that they learn from relationships. But other than that, you guys, thanks for tuning in. And what you want to say, Ryan?
Thank y'all for tuning in. Thank y'all for supporting the Speakeasy. And thank you, Sage, for becoming a part of the family because we have that resource now. Y'all
Yeah.
have somewhere to go, some knowledge to get, and some jewels to be dropped. And take this advice and run with it because every single thing that she just said was nourishing, resourceful, and enlightening to help you have a better perspective on what you're going through, what you may be struggling with in your relationship.
Yeah. All right. So thank you guys again. Thank you for showing up, Brian. And I'll talk to you guys. See you next week.
We out. We love y'all.
Bye.